Hi, I'm Mike Mercer. I'd like to welcome you to Empower You. Tonight's guest is Enrique Mallen, and he's a professor at Sam Houston State University. He's an expert on Picasso, and he'll be giving a presentation um, entitled "Picasso: His Life and Art." And he'll be discussing Picasso's life as sort of an arc or framework. And as he discusses his life, he'll talk about the evolution of Picasso's art and the people he worked with, his relationships, et cetera, and how those things impacted his art. So that's it. I would like to now introduce Enrique Mallen. So as I mentioned, he's a professor at Sam Houston State University. He's actually the director and general editor of something called the Online Picasso Project, which is really it's a digital catalog on Picasso online. It's used by scholars around the world. And he studied at Cornell. He got a PhD at Cornell, and he's taught at the Heinrich Heine University in Dusseldorf. Um, as a scholar, he's published a bunch of journal articles. He's contributed to many edited volumes and encyclopedias. He's written extensively on Picasso's cubist and surrealist periods, and also on Picasso's own writing. So Enrique has written about Picasso's own writing, things that he wrote. He lectures at conferences uh, organized by universities and museums. We're actually referred to Enrique by the Dali Museum. The Dali Museum gave us a talk last spring about uh, that art, Dali, Salvador Dali. Right? So, um, so that's it. I'd like to welcome you, Enrique, to Empower You.
Hello.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. I know, as I mentioned, I think a lot of people are very excited about this class, um, including myself and our director, Dan Reganold. He's a Picasso lover. So now you're going to take this multi-dimensional look at Picasso's life. And my understanding is you have pictures you'll be showing, images.
Right. I have a PowerPoint, so I will be sharing the screen right now.
Okay. And so I will be turning my camera off. If
Okay.
people, Enrique has welcomed the audience to submit questions throughout his talk. So when I see a question in the Q&A, I will turn my audio on so I can ask him the question and he can respond in a moment. So I will turn my video off now.
I hope people can see the screen. Um, so the title of my presentation is Pablo Ruiz Picasso, the most influential and prolific artist of the 20th century. So we'll be talking about how Picasso um, was really prolific for one thing. I mean, he's the estimated number of works of Picasso are 50,000 works. And so you can see a lot of the works that I will be talking about, all the works that I will be talking about on the Online Picasso Project has already been mentioned. We have already cataloged 40,000, almost 40,361 works to be exact. And so you will see a number, an OPP number that refers to the Online Picasso Project. And you can check any of these works later if you want to. To access the Online Picasso Project, you just go to picasso.shsu.edu and it's completely free. So you can access it and examine it. You need to get a password, but the password is granted to you when you contact us. So Pablo Picasso is definitely the most influential and prolific artist of the 20th century. Like I said, he produced about 50,000. He was groundbreaking. His innovations and versatility and artistic brilliance is known to everyone. Everybody has heard about cubism, for example. He was very influential also during the surrealist period. Breton and Breton, who was a major figure in surrealism, he actually said that surrealism had to go through Picasso. So he was a major figure already in his lifetime. Also, another thing that is interesting about Picasso is the fact that he had a diversity of styles. He didn't stick to one particular form. Not only that, but he also used different techniques. So, for example, a lot of people know about Picasso the painter, but Picasso was also revolutionary as a sculptor, and he also did ceramics. He did lithographs. Um, he did etchings, and in any of these areas, he programmed. So basically, he was innovative in everything that he did, and sometimes even confusing people. For example, when he did lithographs, he worked with some professionals in that field, and they were shocked by the things that he was able to do. The same thing with ceramics. When he started working with ceramics, a lot of people said, that you can't do that. But then he did it, and of course, he was a major revolution. For example, in ceramics, he was so revolutionary that the town of Valoris, where he lived and where he started to do ceramics, had kind of gone down after the war, after World War II. And because Picasso started doing ceramics in that town, the town was revitalized. So that's kind of the influence that Picasso was able to have. So who is Picasso? You cannot understand Picasso without knowing his background. We know that Picasso was a Spaniard. He was born in Malaga. And as you can see, Malaga is, I put a little dot there in Spain, southern Spain. And you can see how distant it is from the rest of Europe. So you would imagine that, of course, that far away, Malaga at the time was very provincial, was far away from Madrid, which was itself quite provincial. And Barcelona was maybe the city in Spain that was, you would say, more in touch with what was going on in the rest of Europe, with Paris and Berlin and so on and so forth. So he was born in 1881. Of course, he died in 1973. So he's very much a man of the 19th century in some of the things that he did. And of course, he lived all of his life in the 20th century. So you have to understand Picasso in that context, and some of the things that he did, some of his attitudes towards females. They have to be contextualized because, there are things that are not acceptable today, but at the time it was unfortunately the norm. His father was José Ruiz Blasco. He was a painter and art teacher, and that's very important because he started Picasso in the art world. And his mother was Maria Picasso Luis, so he actually adopted the name of his mother, Ruiz being such a fairly common name in Spain. So that's the reason why he's known mostly as Picasso, but his full name is Ruiz Picasso. So he started working at the School of Fine Arts in Malaga, where his father, he started taking classes at the School of Fine Arts in Malaga, where his father was a teacher. And then eventually, his father being an art teacher, he would be transferred to different places. So one of the places that he was transferred to is A Coruña. So Picasso was starting to go to school in Malaga, but then soon after he was transferred to La Coruña. So the family moved to La Coruña in 1881, and his father gets a teaching position there, the Instituto de Guarda, and Picasso starts taking classes. And even when he started taking classes with this very early age, you can see that he was pretty good in drawing and painting. So these are some of the works that he was doing in 1894, already in A Coruña. The one on the left is a portrait of his sister, Lola. And then the other one on the right is an academic study, and he did many of these. And everybody was really shocked by his ability in drawing. So a lot of people think that when they see some of the works that of late Picasso, that he couldn't draw. But when we look at these pictures and drawings and oils, you can see that is not the case, that Picasso was actually very, very capable of doing representational painting. So when they transferred to Barcelona, Picasso was about 8 or 9 years old. He was accepted to the School of Fine Arts in Barcelona. You can see a picture there on the left. And again, every time he went into one of these art schools, a lot of people were amazed about his capacity, how he was able to do conventional art in very, very proficient way. So he went very, very fast through school. So one of the first works that he did, you can see, for example, the 1895. There, he did a lot of representations of old people, which is also interesting for Picasso because, I mean, being young at that age and starting his career, that didn't keep him from representing things that were of his interest. So in this case, for example, Picasso has always been interested in aging, the process of aging, age, death, and so on and so forth. And also, Picasso is going to incorporate very often friends, relatives, family members in some of his paintings. So, for example, here in the 1895 First Communion painting, the man that is standing beside the girl that is going through First Communion, the girl is actually his sister Lola, and then the man is his father, and then the woman behind is the mother. So this is a kind of an incorporation of elements of his own life into his art. It is also has been argued in 1895 he had another sister, Conchita, who unfortunately died from an illness. And it's been argued that the reason why you have two of the candles there blown out is because, it's basically he's showing that there's something missing, that there's another member of the family that could have been in the portrait, but is missing from that. Again, here you can see representation of his mother, for example, in 1896, and you can see his skill is amazing. This is a pastel, so that kind of technique you have to be very careful because if you make mistakes, it's very difficult to correct yourself. And you can see how it's executed very efficiently, very quickly, and very, very precisely. And if you see photographs of his mother, you can see that it's a true representation. For himself, however, we see that Picasso very early on, already in 1896, he was pretty creative with his own portrait. So, for example, we can see how he's doing his hair there, kind of in a more of a kind of a wild person technique. So Picasso here is representing himself as kind of a romantic writer, a romantic poet of some sort, and he's aging himself. So Picasso here looks older in the picture than he actually was. And so Picasso is also always going to be very, very creative with, not only is he going to include members of his family and friends and so on and so forth, but when he paints himself, he's also talking about himself, who he is, who he wants to be. This is one of the first paintings that Picasso did that were a success. It's called Science and Charity. And again, we see the representation of the person sitting as the doctor, taking the pulse of the woman, is actually his father. And then the girl, the girl that is representing the nun is actually his sister. And so you can see, how he's adding elements to this. This is a very conventional painting at the time. This was a very common thing to represent. Actions like this, where you have a sick person in bed, they're basically trying to move the viewer into the painting. This is what we call symbolism painting. And so this is going to be the first phase of Picasso, this kind of symbolism and that he's going to implement. And this is going to be followed through several years. But this symbolism, when he moves to Barcelona, as we're going to see next. So here you can see a portrait of the father that he did on the left, and you can see how the father is also represented in the Science and Charity. This painting actually got an award when it was presented. And so it was a success. And this was important because Picasso started already being successful at the beginning of his career. And when you start being successful like this, I kind of grants you some freedom that you can do certain things because you know that you've been accepted in the field. So one of the very important steps that Picasso takes in 1900 is his move to Paris. So he goes to Paris. The reason why he goes to Paris is because there was a painting that had been accepted, which is amazing for somebody that young, to be shown at the Exposition Internationale in Paris. And you can see this is the pictures of that international exhibition. And Picasso was there with some accepted masters. The painting that was actually included in that was on the same theme as we see in Science and Charity, again, of a dying person. And so the painting has disappeared. Very interestingly, we didn't know what it was, but then it was found years later. And I'll show you where that painting is right now. But this is the painting that was shown in Paris. So at first, Picasso, when he moves to Paris, and another thing that we know about Picasso is that he was very interested in language, the language of art. So he thought of painting as a way of communicating, either learning something or communicating an idea, a thought, as a means of communication. So at first, he's going to explore different languages. So it's very typical of Picasso when he first gets to Paris to imitate some of the post-impressionists. As you can see, some of the early paintings of his remind us very much of paintings by Toulouse-Lautrec or Van Gogh and so on and so forth. You can see the painting, for example, at the bottom, the dessert. You can see there some of the brushworks and are better known for in Van Gogh, or the painting on the top is very much like some of the paintings that you see in Toulouse-Lautrec and some of the other painters. So this is where he starts. He's basically started looking at other people's languages. At first, Picasso was accused a little bit of plagiarism because people thought that he was imitating them. But what Picasso was actually doing is exploring the language that he used to see what language best fit what he wanted to do with them. We cannot forget that Picasso was very aware of languages. I mean, after all, he started in Malaga speaking Spanish, and then he moved with his family to Barcelona, and he spoke fluently Catalan. And then eventually, when he moves to Paris, he's going to become fluent in French. So Picasso was very much aware of these different languages. So this is also going to have an impact on his painting.
Enrique, I had a question for you. I don't know if you can go back to those, but the color is incredible. Was he known for his color?
That's the thing. A lot of people, Picasso is known mostly for the composition, for the drawing. He was mostly a draftsman, and second, a colorist. As opposed, for example, to Matisse. Matisse is known for his colors more than anything else. But when he did colors, sometimes he could do it really well. And you're going to see some of the paintings that we're going to look at. His colors are incredible. For example, some of the works that he did in the 1930s, 1932 in particular, the colors are very brilliant, very bright, and they're very attractive. So Picasso could do colors very well. So that's another thing that his ability to kind of do different things. So if he wanted to, Picasso could have stayed with the same thing. I mean, he could have continued doing, and he did quite a few. He did an exhibition in 1901 at the Ambroise Vollard Gallery, which is a very prestigious gallery at the time, and he was a success. So he didn't change styles because his painting was not accepted, was not going well. He changed because he wanted to change. He wanted to explore different languages, like I said earlier, to communicate different ideas or to see how the language of painting could be expressed in different ways.
Wow. So
what we see in 1901, after he goes to Paris, there is a major event that happens is that his friend Carlos Casagemas commits suicide, and this has a major impact. This is the friend that went with him in 1900 to Paris. So they kind of share the pain of the beginning of their career in Paris. Very poor, starting, not recognized, people not buying their art at the very beginning. So even though he was having success in Spain, when he gets to Paris, he's a nobody. And so Casagemas was a very close friend. And see, he kills himself, and he kills himself over this female person that was this woman that we see here on the left. Her name was Germaine Gargallo, and he fell in love with her, and she didn't feel the same way. So basically, he killed himself. And this is going to introduce what we normally call the blue period, where Picasso is going to turn into basically the color blue as a feeling of sadness, But it's not only sadness, but also poverty. You have to remember that Picasso is going through all these things at the very beginning of his career. He doesn't have a lot of money. He's not accepted. He's being rejected. So he feels like really a beggar to a certain degree. So this combined with the fact that his friend killed himself is what we see in the so-called blue period. And also, like I said earlier, he maintains that kind of symbolist idea because the paintings cannot be taken as true representation, but they're always symbolic of something. So, for example, we see how Picasso here in this painting, he kind of ages himself. He looks older than he actually was. When we look at pictures of Picasso, you can see here of 1901, he was definitely not as bad. He didn't look as bad as he portrays himself to be. And only the coat that he puts on himself, bigger than he actually is, it makes him look smaller. So what he's trying to represent is not just himself, but also kind of a symbol of the artist, of the abandoned artist, a recognized artist. And there is a lot of Van Gogh in this painting also. You can see some of the brush strokes are very, very much Van Gogh, especially if you close in on the face, which you can do on the Picasso project. You can see how Picasso is representing himself as the misunderstood artist or not recognized artist. So he's going to be doing a lot of these paintings, blue paintings, very often representing the rejects of society. So here, beggars, prostitutes, and so on and so forth. So here you can see the famous painting is in Chicago. This is the guitar player. And Picasso, again, not only represents a beggar, but he also uses all kinds of symbolic elements. So for example, you can see the way he's crossing his legs, the way he's kind of basically creating a cross with the windows and the floor. Picasso has in mind kind of the idea of a crucifixion. So when we look at the guitar player, it's not only a guitar player, but it's actually a sacrificed individual. So he's the artist presented as a victim of society. And this is how Picasso is going to portray himself during this period. And then in 1903, he does an important painting, one of the most important paintings that he did in this period. He went through different stages. And in this is called Life. And this painting is incredibly fascinating because one of the things that people have done X-rays of the painting, and what they discovered is actually underneath this major painting of 1903 is the canvas that he had brought and was exhibited in Paris in 1901. So Picasso basically brought it back and then recycled the canvas. This is very typical at the time of Picasso because he was poor, he didn't have a lot of money, but also he liked the idea of revitalizing, of bringing to life a painting that was a previous attempt that he had made. So this is a fascinating painting. Also, another thing that is interesting, the man that is represented there is Casagemas, okay? So we know that from pictures of Casagemas that is actually a representation of him. When Picasso was doing this painting, an early stage of the painting, and we know this from X-rays, actually has the face of Picasso. So what Picasso did, he basically brought his friend back to life, just like he brought the painting back to life. You can see in the X-ray the painting. So there was a light. There's a bed, and there's a light, and there's a dying person. This is the painting that he brought to Paris to be exhibited in the Exposición Internacional. So basically, he's doing this for symbolic purposes. Okay. Also, the gestures that he's pointing up to the female over there, and we know that the relationship between Casagemas and Germain had broken down. So he could be indicating here the possibility, something that could have happened in that relationship, but of course, never did. So he's basically giving life to Casagema by saying he could have married Germain, they could have had children, and so on and so forth. In 1904, Picasso starts transitioning to what we normally call the Rose period. And again, this is a fascinating painting. Picasso represents himself again. Like I said earlier, it's not a true representation of Picasso. Picasso represents himself as a harlequin. And you can see that the woman beside him is actually Germaine. So Picasso again is kind of playing with events in his life. So Germain was the one that caused the death of his friend to a certain degree. And then Picasso is kind of representing himself as a harlequin. The harlequin is the figure of basically the person that comes from the other side. The harlequin is etymologically is related to the word, to the person that comes from the other side. So it's basically, and here's the outfit that he wears. Basically, is not here, not there. It's kind of a transition element. And Picasso was very interested in this. So by representing himself as a harlequin in this particular painting, he's representing himself as somebody that comes from the dead. And so he's actually portraying himself, but also Casagemas in this painting together with Germain. And this is the kind of basically the idea that he does very often in his paintings. In 1904, he finally settled in Barcelona. At the very beginning, Picasso went back and forth. He went from Paris to Barcelona, and he would go to spend several months in Barcelona, then go back to Paris because he was not having success at the very beginning. But by 1904, he settled in Paris, and he lived in the painting the place that is called Le Bateau Lavoie, that you can see there. It's kind of rundown studio where some of the poor people, poor artists lived. Like you can see, for example, Max Jacob lived there, and so on and so forth. So it's a very poor, very basic living arrangement. And while he's there, he meets Fernando Olivier. So this is going to be really the first serious relationship that Picasso is going to have. And it has been argued that to a certain degree, Fernando Olivier is going to bring that transition to this second period that is so-called Rose period. Picasso has now settled in Paris. He's having a certain amount of success. His paintings are being purchased now by people. And so he represents himself again here as a harlequin, but in a more in a happier kind of surrounding. He's almost like a new family. You can see here how all the members of the family are put together. One of the interesting things that is being argued is that this painting actually represents almost Picasso's hand. So Picasso, you can see that he's showing his hand there as almost like a symbol. Again, this is a kind of a symbolist painting saying, like, this is me. My hand is almost like my fingerprint. And you have 5 members of his family together, as almost like a hand itself. Okay, so this has been said, has been argued to be his friend Apollinaire, who was a friend, a poet of the time. This has been argued to be Marc Jacob, and so so some of his friends are here grouped together. Again, this is a very important painting. Eventually, when this painting is sold, it would sell for an incredible amount of time, of money. And this was important to Picasso's career. Like Picasso would say later, is the success of my Rose period that allowed me to do some of the things that I did afterwards. Like I said, if you're successful, then you can be creative. This is another painting that he did around this time. This is actually started as a painting of Max Jacob, the poet that I mentioned that lived in the Bateau Lavoie. And then he basically recreated. So he started as a very representational art painting, but then he added these flowers that it creates kind of an atmosphere that is very symbolic of a poet living in a higher dimension. And then by 1907, Picasso kind of transitions into a major change, which is we normally know this as proto-cubism. This is Le Demoiselle d'Avignon at the time was not recognized, was not accepted even by artists like Matisse and some of the colleagues that he had around. They thought that Picasso had basically gone crazy. And a lot of people have seen here different influences. For example, you can see the influence of Iberian art, especially in the 2 females in the center. But you can see African art also in some of the other figures. One of the reasons has been argued that this painting was not accepted at the time is because it's not consistent. It's an inconsistent painting in the sense that you have a combination of representational, because you can see the 5 figures in what is supposed to be a brothel. But then you have different styles being implemented. You have sort of an Iberian look in these figures, but then you have more primitive look in these other side figures. So that this kind of idea of having a painting in transition, a painting that is not completely finished, was not accepted. And Picasso actually, that's exactly what he liked. He was quoted as saying, "When a painting is done, finished, dead." So a painting should always be left unfinished for the viewer, maybe to finish it, but not for the painter to finish it himself. And then, of course, that is what I refer to as proto-cubism. This is 1909, 1910, when Picasso starts to go into true cubism. So the first one here, you can see some of the paintings that he did in Horta, a town that he spent some time in Spain. This is normally called Caesarian cubism, and you can see how Picasso is playing with the idea of cubes, and hence the name. In this, he basically shared it with his friend Georges Braque, that also implemented this kind of cubist approach. It almost looks like things are kind of cubes put together into the composition. But that transition into what we normally refer to as analytic cubism, and you can see that painting in 1910, where it becomes almost abstract. This is actually his dealer, Kahnweiler, and as a matter of fact, an early stage of this painting was even more abstract. And the reason why you can recognize some of the features is because Picasso added them later. So you can see, for example, the eyes here in the area. You can see the mouth. You can see the hands. You can see the difference between the jacket and some of the surrounding. Picasso, he kind of implemented that a little bit later, but at one point it was really abstract, and that's the direction in which he was going. So you can see here the painting in a larger view. And then from analytic cubism, he transitioned into synthetic cubism. Synthetic cubism basically is the idea of the language of art being creative. So art doesn't have to be representational. In other words, doesn't have to have a reality that art represents. Art could create a new reality. So here we see that Picasso is basically putting things together that don't exist before. So here you can see another thing that is incredible about here is the combination of elements. So for example, Picasso did a piece of something that you use on a table, right? Like a tablecloth sort of material, and he just basically cut it up and pasted it on it. And so he has that, and he has also a rope around to represent wood. So you can see it's a combination of elements, and of course you have the paint itself. And this also is, he's playing with the idea of, so this is supposed to be a painting, but it's also supposed to be a table. So he's playing with the idea of tableau in French, which could mean also, kind of the idea of a table. So this could be either a representation of a table seen from on top, or it could be a mirror that is representing a chair and a table, at a cafe. So this is considered to be the first collage. So Picasso introduced that as the idea of mixing different elements. So a painting doesn't have to be done exclusively with oil, but you can use it with different elements. And so this is what is going to start this new style. Then towards 1912, Picasso meets another person, Fernando Olivier. His relationship is going to decline, and he meets Eva Guel. And this is actually a representation of Eva Guel that you see there. Is the second relationship. And she introduced this new, she was really behind the synthetic cubism. We know that she was a seamstress. So it has been argued that maybe some of the cutouts that he did for her clothing, when she was making some of the clothes, influenced some of the papier collé or some of the collages that Picasso was using. The relationship was very short because unfortunately Eva Guel died, which is going to have a very serious impact on his life. So in 1915, he does this painting as she was dying of cancer. And you can see how Picasso is representing again himself as a harlequin, but in this case, this painting actually started as two dancers, presumably Picasso dancing with Eva Guel, but then towards the end, it represents just one figure, Harlequin. Um, some people have seen the outline of Picasso's head here. You can see that you can imagine him. So this is a portrait of himself mourning the death of Leguin. Um, the painting is fairly abstract. You can see how Picasso moved towards abstraction in synthetic cubism. You can see here is an example of another painting related to that. You can see the two dancers here a little bit more clearly. You can see the arms, and you can see a male and a female with a skirt. So this is how the painting started, but then it transitioned into just one single individual. Then about 1917, Picasso got involved with the ballet, which is really interesting. He kind of decided to move away a little bit from Cubism. One of the reasons for that is because a lot of people were basically imitating him. And so he thought that it would be best for him to kind of move away and to show the world that he could do other things and do things differently. So he went to Rome and he met Olga Koklova, a ballerina in one of the Russian ballets. And he started doing more representational painting. So this is what is normally known as the neoclassical period. And you can imagine the shock of people when Picasso went from those synthetic paintings to these kind of representational painting and more neoclassical. Of course, still being very creative as Picasso is, because I mean, this is far from representational. You can see that the arms are fairly long. So Picasso is actually playing with the language of classical art by doing his own implementation of it. This painting of Olga is based on a photograph and it's fairly representational. But notice that Picasso, very interestingly, he leaves the painting unfinished. You can see that the background is left undone. So this is actually the canvas. So basically, is the idea to say, yes, this is a representational painting, but it is a painting. It is a work of an artist. And so it's not something that should be taken as a photograph, as reality. Painting is painting, reality is reality. So it's the idea of painting being creative. This is another painting that he did in 1923. Again, this is the neoclassical period. But you can see how, again, Picasso is being very creative. And like I mentioned earlier, Picasso is mostly a draftsman. You can see how the precision of the line is a line that is very often unfinished, and then the color is applied second to it. And very often crossing the borders. Yeah.
Enrique, I'm just curious. These, what was it, the neoclassical? Is that the
Yes.
period? It just seems like the complexity of the composition is so much simpler.
Yes, because Picasso is basically he's concentrating on the line mostly. If he concentrated on construction during synthetic cubism, you're going to see that in the neoclassical and actually moving on to the next period that we're going to see, he's mostly interested in the flow of the line and how the line defines its own existence. So yes, the compositional structure of it is not as complex, of course, as what we saw with the cubist. Here's another painting of Neoclassical 23, and this is how Picasso is transitioning towards basically kind of another dimension. So there's a whole thing of dream world in these depictions. Now they're not representing individuals that he actually saw. They're imaginary people. So this is the flutes of Pan, and Picasso is representing kind of the classical world, but in an imaginary. So Picasso is moving to the dream world, which is going to be fundamental for his Cubist period. And this is in 1924. This is a critical year in Picasso, when Picasso is moving towards more of the surrealist style. This is supposed to be a still life with two guitars. You can see the guitars and a bottle in the middle, but it's hard to judge. What is interesting, how Picasso is reverting a little bit to Cubism here, but is doing it differently. You can see the flow of the line, like I mentioned earlier. So you can see the shape of the guitar, the round shapes. They almost exist on their own, or even the tablecloth that is sitting on top of the table. What is interesting about this is that you see this at different levels. You can see this as a still life, You can see this. Some people have seen in this a lying female, a model lying on the chair. But actually, what's interesting, if you superimpose a skull on this, it could also be read as a self portrait. So these would be the two eyes, and you can see the bottom would be the teeth of the skull. And Picasso is very interested in this kind of idea of death. Like I said, from very early in his life, he was interested in aging, the idea of age, death, and so on and so forth. So it could be that as his painting is transitioning, he's he's thinking about transitioning in his own life. Okay, so this is
It,
a very important. Yes.
we have a question from the audience. Someone asked, whose work would you compare Picasso's to the most?
Well, it depends on what phase of Picasso. In the Cubist period, of course, to Braque, the one that he developed cubism with. Then we're going to see in the 1930s. You can see a lot of people have seen similarities between Picasso and Matisse in the colors that Picasso uses. So I would say those two are major artists. And Picasso was very aware of that, of the influence that these two artists had on him.
Uh,
So here's 1925. His life with Olga was not going very well. The ballerina that he met, and this actually is supposed to be started as a representation of Olga. You can see Olga there as a ballerina, and you can see how Picasso is basically deforming Olga almost intentionally. And what it does is, again, he kind of refers to the kind of symbolism of a crucifixion. So he's basically representing the female in the middle, not just as a ballerina, but as a crucified individual, as a victim. And the two people on the two sides are also kind of it started as ballerinas, but then towards the end, they're hard to interpret. Here we see in that area, basically the outline of another figure that Picasso added later on in 1925. He was in Monte Carlo at the time, and a good friend of his, Ramon Pichot, died at the time. Ramon Pichot, who presumably is shown in this painting because he just died, actually had married Germaine, who is the woman that I show there on the left, who is the person that caused the death of his friend Casagemas. So you can see how Picasso is kind of relating. I mean, over 20 years later, he's kind of putting together things, right? So bringing his friend Ramon Pichot back to life in his painting, just like he did with Casagemas, and Ramon Pichot is related to Germaine, just like Casagemas was related. So you can see in this sense how Picasso's painting cannot be understood without looking at his biography, what things were happening in his life. In the 1930s, then late 1920s, early 1930s, Picasso meets another woman, Maria Therese Walter. She was a young woman, and she would have a tremendous impact on his life. He basically separated from Olga. The relationship was not going very well. Olga was the one presumably that kind of pushed him towards more of that neoclassical style to a certain degree. She was fairly conservative, and she thought that kind of painting would sell better. And so as he moves away from Olga, he returns to kind of these more abstract sort of painting. And the paintings that he does of Maria Therese are always very sensual. For example, this one is called The Dream. She very often is represented dreaming in this kind of world, and the colors that he uses are always colors that are very lively. We know that Picasso wanted to have another kid. He had one kid with Olga. His first kid was named Paulo, because since they met in Rome, they gave him the name Pablo. Instead of Pablo, they call him Paulo. But he wanted to have a second kid, and Olga did not want to have a second kid. And so he's going to have a second kid, but not with Olga, but with Maria Therese. And she's going to be born in 1935. And that's Maya Picasso, who is fairly well known. She just passed away not that long ago. This is Maria Therese, and you can see that even the painting being very abstract on the left, you can see some of the features of her. So Picasso's representation was influenced by the looks of the individual that he represented. You can see the curves of her hair, her nose, her chin, are actually influencing the kind of style that he's implementing. So you can see that we could call these, and that has been done. Picasso's period has also have also been divided into uh, uh, periods related to the female companion at the time. So, for example, a lot of people call it the Maria Therese period or the Francois Gillot period, and so on and so forth. And we're going to see that that's the case with the next one. So this is the surrealist period in Picasso. And 1936, of course, is a critical year because that's the Civil War in Spain. And Picasso was doing at the time the kind of this dream world of the surrealists, where they were trying to represent the subconscious. But of course, the war kind of brought him back. So we're going to see that he's going to move away from these kind of neoclassical figures of the Minotaur and so on and so forth, where he represents himself as the Minotaur. And then this is, of course, Maria Therese. And this is Olga, presumably, that he's abandoning, transitioning towards Maria Therese to, of course, the representation of the war. And around this time, 1936, he meets another woman. Remember that Picasso was still married to Olga Koklova. He's in a relationship with Maria Therese, and he meets another woman, Dora Maar, who is a photographer in 1936. And she's going to be very influential. She spoke Spanish as opposed to Maria Therese or Olga. So he has more of an intellectual relationship with her. And of course, 1937 is where the Civil War happens. And then, of course, Guernica happens, where it's bombed by the Germans. And you can see photographs of Guernica. And that's when Picasso does the famous painting, Guernica, of that name. And so this is when Picasso kind of it does a combination of things, because here we can see elements of cubism, elements of surrealism, but of course Picasso is also representing the fact of the Civil War. So you can see he's also bringing elements from classical times. So the bull, to a certain degree, could be read as the Minotaur that he's bringing, but he's also representing Maria Therese as the female here. He's bringing elements from the bullfight with the horse and the bull. From Spanish culture. So he's combining everything at this point. And then, of course, the World War II happens, and Picasso is in Paris at the time. So he's living under the occupation, and he does representations like this. So Picasso said, I never depicted the war itself, but you can see the war in my pictures. And you can see this is a representation of an individual living under the oppression of the German occupation. You can see that her legs are almost like bone-like. Some of the figures, she feels like a tortured individual. And also very often in his representations in the 1940s, that people are basically encaged, like they're put in a sort of a enclosed environment. And so this is actually self-representation to a certain degree of Picasso. Another painting that he did in 1942 is this one. Again, we see the figure of the bull, a bull, but it's just a skull, and he's represented behind a covered window. Again, very representational, because in 1942, a lot of times at night, the windows had to be covered. So this is actually Picasso represented the death of the environment that he was living under the occupation, but also representing the possibility of death. I mean, a lot of people were being killed, were being murdered during the occupation, and Picasso was actually very much a person that known person at the time, a known artist, and he actually had been banned by the Germans. So they knew where he lived, and he could have been imprisoned at any time. He was not, but he could have been. And towards the end of the war, Picasso did this painting, Le Charnier. You can see the skeletons of people. People have said that this could represent a lot of the pictures of the concentration camps were coming out. So these could have been influenced by that. But it's also the fact Picasso went to see a movie that had been taken of the consequences of the Civil War. And these are some of the scenes in the movie. And you can see the families being murdered in Spain, which probably more affected him more than some of the pictures that were coming later on. So actually, it's been argued that this is actually the direct influence on the painting. And then In 1946, he meets another woman, Françoise Gillot. Um, he breaks with Dora Maar. He maintains his relationship with Maria Teresa, of course, because they have a kid together, Maya. But he starts a new relationship with Françoise. And this is Picasso kind of basically, his life coincides with the coming back to life of Europe, right? Europe kind of recovering from the war, and Picasso is recovering from the war himself. So this is a very happy period where he concentrates mostly on light, like so you can see, for example, the representation of Françoise as a flower, birth, giving birth, giving new life to things. This painting started very, very representational, but then he basically transformed her into a very simple representation of a flower. And then around this time, Picasso starts to get into other things as well. This is a very creative period. So this kind of revitalization that I was saying, that I was mentioning earlier, he actually was true for Picasso because he started doing lithographs. He did linocuts, you can see here very creatively. He did ceramics. He did sculptures. And so around this time, Picasso basically he could do just about everything. He was doing every single thing. Of course, he was also still doing sculptures. So he was doing all kinds of media. And then towards the end of his life, he breaks with François Gillot. She actually is the one that left him. They had two children, Claude and Paloma Picasso, fairly well known. And but their relationship was not going well. And so he meets another woman, Jacqueline Gros, and this is the woman that he eventually would marry after the death of Olga, because he never divorced her, so he had to wait until she died, and then after her death, he was able to marry her, and she was basically a major influence towards the end. You can see some of the representations that we have of Jacqueline as very kind of stable individual. She actually was very, very important to Picasso the last years of his life because it allowed him the 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 peace and quiet and to concentrate on his work. Remember that Picasso at this time was already getting old. And so another thing that he did towards the end of his life, he basically went back to some of the other paintings. He wanted to compare himself to some of the masters. So you can see representations. For example, this is a combination of paintings by Poussin and David. And Picasso is going to do a representation of, or basically reinterpretations of paintings by Velázquez, by Goya, by some of the French masters, Manet, and so on and so forth. And he wanted to see how does his language, his new language that he had created, how did it compare to the language of some of the other masters? And you can see how he does it in these paintings. And one of the last paintings that I wanted to talk about is this one that Picasso did towards the end of his life. This is in 1972. Picasso died in 1973. And here again, he kind of basically goes back. It's interesting to look at Picasso and to go back and forth. If you remember the old man that he painted very early on in 1895, when he was still in transition between A Coruña and Barcelona, and Picasso was concentrating on age, the possibility of death. And here Picasso, even before dying, and he didn't know exactly when he was going to die, he's already portraying himself as a skull, as a dead person. So he's basically looking into the future in these works. So when he was examining age, dying, he's very often interpreting the possibility that this could happen to him. So again, Picasso's art is very much biographical. And a few things that I want to mention is in the fact that Picasso was very influential is that Picasso is still very much accepted. As you know, Picasso is selling for incredible amounts of money. So, for example, this painting that we see here was just sold in 2016, not long ago, for an estimated $8 million to $12 million. So, what is interesting about Picasso is the fact that even though he's an artist of the 19th century and 20th century, even in the 21st century, he's still very much accepted and appreciated. So that is incredible for somebody who did so many styles, who broke so many rules. The fact that people still admire and still want to have some of his works at home. And to finish, I would like to mention again the Picasso project. So you can see all of the works that I mentioned on this presentation and many more. Like I said, we have so far 40,000 works catalog there on the Picasso project. Again, picasso.shsu.edu. You can see any of the works, but just contacting me and you get the password. So with that, I will, if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah. We I had a few questions myself, and
Sure.
I thought I'd start with those.
Okay.
And the audience, anyone can submit questions while I'm asking mine, and I will stop if I see a question from the audience and ask that question. But I want to ask you first of all about the Guernica.
Okay.
That's an enormous painting, isn't it? I mean, I
Yes, it
think I
is.
saw it in Madrid. It's in
Yes, it is in
Madrid?
Madrid. It's in the Museo de Reina Sofia in Madrid.
So it's huge, isn't it?
It's
Isn't it?
huge. It's huge. And it basically takes the whole room. It's a whole room dedicated to it.
Yeah.
All the
Well,
music.
I wanted to ask you, when you see a painting like this, I imagine that he had to plan this, right? And I wanted to ask you about he was so prolific and produced what, tens of thousands of works, right?
Right.
And I've seen there's that famous video, a film of him painting on glass, and he starts off with the flowers. He keeps morphing this image just in
Right.
the moment as he goes into something new. It keeps becoming a new thing. So I'm thinking about the fact that he produced so much artwork,
Right.
and he illustrated or demonstrated how he could just evolve things in the moment.
Right.
Is he someone who planned and did studies for his paintings, or was it all just spontaneous?
No, very much so. Picasso was, for example, we have studies, but numerous studies of the Guernica. And the nice thing about this is that he donated, not only did he donate the painting itself, but the studies for the painting were also donated. So they can, if you go to the Museo Reina Sofia in Madrid, not only can you see the painting, you can see the studies for the painting. And it's fascinating to see the evolution of the idea, how he's basically developing the ideas from very simple draft to a very complex painting.
Wow.
Another interesting thing about this painting is that at the time, 1937, he was living with Dora Maar, the photographer that he was involved with, and she took photographs of the painting at different stages. So remember that Picasso always thought of the painting as being a transition, an unfinished painting. And a lot of people have argued that the painting is unfinished, that the Guernica is unfinished. So what is interesting about this is that you can see in photographs how he changes ideas. So for example, at one point, as he was doing the Guernica, he put some collage on it. He put some pieces of material on it to add color to it. And then he decided, no, that was not the way to go. So he took them off.
Wow.
And so you can see how he's constantly, the idea of metamorphosis is very important to Picasso, kind of the painting transforming itself, constantly changing in front of you. And so that's the good thing. There is also a film that was made of Picasso, how he basically is changing the painting, and how sometimes you kind of wish that he would stop because you like the painting the way it was, but he keeps changing it. And of course, is once you change the painting is finished, is changed. But the change is fundamental to Picasso.
Wow. Excuse me, my allergies, but I also wanted to ask you about Antonio Gaudí, the architect in Barcelona.
Mm-hmm.
Did they have any interactions? Did they?
No. No, Gaudí was more of a 19th century. He was an old man, but by the time Picasso was in Barcelona, so there was no interaction whatsoever.
And then I was also wondering, was there some sort of artistic flourishing going on in Barcelona? Because didn't Dalí live there for a while? Then you get Picasso and
They
Gaudí.
didn't coincide because Dalí is much younger than Picasso. So Dalí came actually when Dalí first came to Paris. The first place that he went to see was Picasso, and Dalí said to Picasso, "I've come to see you before I even went to the Louvre," and Picasso said, "You did the right thing." So it's interesting. And Picasso was also very, very helpful at first with Dali. He actually uh, he lent him money. He connected it to some of his friends and so forth. So he was very, very, very much a promoter of Dali at the very beginning. So
I also, I think I asked you about this when I first contacted you, but I was wondering if you could, share this with the audience. I had noticed with Picasso's paintings, he creates such a strong relationship to the frame because he has lots of strong, sometimes massive vertical and horizontal forms that are parallel to the frame.
right.
But he also has a lot of lines that intersect with the corners of the painting. And I was just wondering if you could comment on that. Is that a
Well, like I said, Picasso is mostly he's the composition is fundamental for him, and that we see that in cubism. But even in this Guernica, for example, you can see the triangulation. You can see that there's a triangular form in the middle of the composition, right? And so Picasso has structured the composition, and then of course there are two vertical areas to each of the side. So, but when he did the composition, he started with that kind of configuration, and then he put elements inside of it, and he made them kind of match that structure. So the structure almost directs the painting. You can see, for example, the inclination of this female that she's walking from right to left. You can see that she's following the triangulation in the middle area. And you can see how the bottom, the back of the horse also kind of it's being inclined, or the table here that you see at the end. Everything is kind of organized by the composition. The composition is fundamental.
Yeah. You can see he literally has lines going to every corner.
Yeah. And one of the things that he did in the surrealist period, which is really interesting, so there is all kinds of crazy stuff because, after all, that's what the surrealists did. Kind of the dream world, the subconscious, trying to get all your obsessions, dreams, fears, frustrations out. And so what Picasso does very often, he creates a framework in the background that is stable. But then on top of that stable framework, you have the craziness mounted on top. So very often what you see is a very kind of square composition at the background, and then a lot of circular elements in the middle of the composition.
Wow. So that makes it feel sort of balanced, right?
Right. You have the balance between the craziness and even, for example, when we saw the painting of the so-called the dance, which sometimes is being called kind of a crucifixion of Olga. You can see that the background is that window very nicely set, very stable, and then right in front of that very conventional background, you have that craziness going on in the front of it. So that's very typical of Picasso, kind of combining the two things.
And I could see in some of the photos you showed of the ceramics that he did. I think you mentioned at the beginning he was very creative with the ceramics, right?
Yes.
Did you say? And they were really impressive and unique. And I'm wondering, was he lauded for that? I mean, was he really in the art world? Was he praised for his ceramics as much as he was for his paintings?
He was, he was very much, at first people, of course, the people that he worked with, some of the ceramic workers, some of the things that they did were not conventional. So they thought, no, you don't do it that way. I mean, you can imagine these people that have been trained to do things the same way, from generation to generation. And all of a sudden here comes Picasso and he's doing all kinds of crazy things. And so they kind of said, no, that's not how you do it. But Picasso said, yes, you can do it that way. And so at first, people reacted like that. But then eventually they saw the genius of Picasso. And of course, like I said, it was a revolutionary innovation there in the town, so much so that he has brought the town back to the public, Valoris. So.
With his mastering the realism that you showed at the beginning, at the age of 14, 15, whatever it was, was he sort of a prodigy? Was he known? Did he start to become known like in Barcelona or in Spain? Did he develop a reputation at such a young age?
Very early on, even in Coruña, even in Barcelona, a lot of people knew that he was very, very capable as an artist, that he was not only very creative in how he did things, but also he was very good. He was very skilled. So that was is a known fact, and he was basically accepted. And one of the reasons why we have so many of his works is because his family also recognized that he was very good, and so they kept every single thing that he did. So we have an incredible collection of his art from very early age until the end. And Picasso was known to keep everything. So that's another good thing because a lot of artists they destroy some of their work that they're not happy with it. So Picasso preserved everything. And that's one of the reasons why we have over 50,000 works of art because he saved every single thing that he did.
I'm curious. I don't know if you know if this is a known thing, but um, how did he make his living? Like, did he receive commissions to excuse me to paint, or did he just produce works and then
No, he
put them up for?
basically, Picasso very early on, one of the reasons is his dealer or his the dealer that he had, Kahnweiler, didn't believe in exhibitions. He didn't believe in basically having him show at the normal conventional places. He thought that if somebody wanted to buy a painting by Picasso, they had to come to his gallery to buy the painting. And this is kind of new because a lot of people went to these major exhibitions um, in order to show to the public what they did and everything get to be known. But Kahnweiler thought that if you really knew, and once people knew him, they had to come to the source. And so, no, Picasso never. One of the few things that he did, for example, Guernica was actually commissioned by the Spanish government in 1937. But that's one of the few paintings that he did by commission. Most of the paintings he did just because he wanted to do the paintings. Now he would do pictures, portraits of people, and so on and so forth, but not as a commission, just basically because he wanted to do it. And sometimes he gave it to them, or they bought them from him, but not as a commission itself.
And this is my last question, Enrique. I was wondering about. I don't think you mentioned this, but he was part of that circle of artists from different realms, right? Different areas, like in Paris, like Gertrude
Mm.
Stein and Hemingway and
Right.
Fitzgerald was part of that. So he
Yes.
was part of that group, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Hemingway was a very close friend of his. Picasso always admired writers throughout his life, and I think it's because of like I said, language was important to him. He was aware of language, of differences between languages, and for him, painting was a language. And of course, eventually in 1935, he starts writing poetry, and he wrote a few plays. So he was always interested by in writing. And some of the friends that he had were poets and were very influential. Max Jacob was one of them. Guillaume Apollinaire was another one. And then other ones, Paul Éluard later on in the 1930s. So, Duque Breton in the surrealist. So he was very, very aware of the importance of writers.
Wow. And wasn't Stein a big promoter
He was
early on?
also, yeah, she was a major promoter. She was one of she and her brother Leo were some of the first buyers of Picasso. They actually had moved to Paris and they had money. The family was, not extremely wealthy, but wealthy enough that they could buy paintings. And so they were some of the first people that bought paintings. And one of the incredible things is that Gertrude Stein had basically at her place, she put all the paintings up on the walls, and a lot of people would come to visit her, and they would have discussions there and everything. So it was kind of a way of showing off some of the work. So she actually not only promoted Picasso by buying his works, but also by showing the works to the rest of the people.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this was really fantastic. It was really
Thank you. Thank you. I
fascinating.
thought
Yeah.
I tried to cover a lot of ground, so I hope I didn't go too fast, but
No, and I think you gave us some really unique insights, that probably a lot of people who feel like they like me, I feel like I know a bit about Picasso. I'm not an expert by any means, but a
mm,
lot of really unique insights and works that I hadn't seen before. So it was fantastic. So thank you very
thank you.
much. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Um,
you.
so that's it for tonight, and I want to thank Enrique, and then remind people that on Thursday I'll actually happen to be the person giving the talk on using Chat GPT to teach yourself anything. So until then, thanks very much, and go out and empower you.